Mahan's Boats and Evil Yellow Notes. I am, as always, your host, Christopher Paul Dugdale, MEDMA. It is January 20th, 2021. And on this date in history, 12 years ago today, Sully Sullenberger landed on the Hudson River whenever his plane hit a flock of birds. And anyway, so we'll celebrate his ability to not kill everyone on the plane. So everyone have a great day and try not to kill everyone on the plane today. So the election of 1896 was one of the big ones in U.S. history. Up until this point, third-party candidates really didn't mean much, and in this one, it looked like it was going to be a major difference because the populist had uh, gotten enough support in 1892 to make 1896 seem even more important. Now, one of the things that happened early in the election was the fact that the Populist Party on the presidential platform decided to merge with the Democratic Party, and this happened when William Jennings Bryan gave his Cross of Gold speech, and in this he supported the unlimited silver coins that was being demanded by the Populist Party. From this point forward, the Populist would support the Democratic Party. Okay, so this is under William Jennings Bryan. Bryan, who would run for president 4 times and lose all 4. He was not a quitter, though. He actually had the major nomination of his party 3 times, which no one before or after has done without winning. Okay, but William Jennings Bryan ran against William McKinley. William McKinley had a lot of support from big business. And what really helped McKinley more than anything is there were some massive gold strikes that were found, introducing a large amount of gold into circulation in the U.S. And so they no longer needed silver. This will end the Populist Party, but really start the progressive movement because the government realizes that they have to do something to take care of the poor, otherwise the poor will rise up and take them out of power. And that's kind of where we'll be headed from here. Now this leads to the Gold Standard Act, and this because there's no longer a gold shortage, this allowed paper money to be exchanged for gold. This was 4 years into McKinley's presidency. The Klondike Gold Rush was one of the things that helped introduce all of this gold. It takes place in the Alaskan border near Canada, but they find just a ridiculous amount of gold that's introduced into the United States. The Klondike Gold Rush does move a lot of people to Alaska, though, to where they can live in very, very harsh and cold weather. It's quite lovely up there. So let's look at statistics. 1910, the average lifespan for men was 47 years. Okay, so if I lived in 1910, I'd have 2 more years to live. Congrats to me. Fuel was sold in drugstores only. Okay. Uh, 14% of the homes had a bathtub, so 1 out of every 7 homes had a bathtub. Okay. 1 in 12 homes had a telephone. Okay. Which, okay, I'm fine with that. There were only 8,000 cars on the road and 144 miles of paved roads. So that's not really a lot of places for cars to drive. A lot of them had to go off-roading. The maximum speed limit in most cities was 10 miles an hour. So people would be, they'd probably crap if they saw what was happening outside the school on a regular basis. The Eiffel Tower was the tallest structure in the world in 1910. The average American made about 22 cents an hour in 1910. and the average worker made between $200 and $400 a year. So, making some serious money, scratch money. An accountant could make about $2,000 a year, so you made about 10 times the average person by being an accountant, which is very boring work and very specialized, so that's why they paid more. A dentist made about 2,500 a year, and a vet between 1,500 and 4,000. You know, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a vet. I just work on horses. Oh, so the only tool they have is a shotgun. A mechanical engineer made about $5,000 a year, so they were seeing a lot of value for mechanical engineers. Okay, 1 in 20 births actually took place at a hospital. Doctors didn't have to go to college to become a medical doctor. They sometimes just worked as apprentices to other doctors for a couple months and then could go and do whatever they needed to do and most likely kill you. In 1910, the most likely way of you dying was the flu and pneumonia, okay, tuberculosis, diarrhea, heart disease, and stroke. So only one of the major causes of my deaths was the major cause of deaths back during this time. Sugar was about 4 cents a pound, eggs about 14 cents a dozen. Coffee was about 15 cents a pound. Uh, Women washed their hair with borax or egg yolks for shampoo. Whenever my wife was in high school, to give her hair curl and body, she would wash it with egg yolks and stale beer, about 3 or 4 days old beer, and that would make her hair big and fluffy and beautiful. Yeah, kind of dig my wife. There was no such thing at the time as deodorant or toothpaste. So people smelled amazing. Canada passed a law that said that poor people couldn't go to Canada. And there were only 45 flags on the stars on the flag. Yeah, stars on the flag in 1910. Crossword puzzles weren't something yet. Canned beer wasn't something. And there was no iced tea. Most drinks were hot or room temperature. No Mother's Day or Father's Day. 1 out of 5 people couldn't read or write. And only 1 out of 16 had actually graduated from high school. Talk about giving you another set of skills that no one else on the job market had. There it was for you, graduating from high school. Almost 1 in 5 houses had a full-time servant. And there were only 230 people that were murdered in the country in 1910. Oh, happy day. So let's talk about this cat, Captain Alfred Thayer Mahan. He was in the Navy, and he studied warfare, and he found that the reason that Great Britain became the most powerful nation on earth was because of the size and power of its navy. And he said for large nations to succeed and expand, they needed a large navy to protect and acquire naval bases overseas to protect their trade and to acquire new territory. And so the biggest countries in the world start really reading through this book. It's 600 pages long, and it is very, it's not a page turner, but what he said was very important. So if you're ever like bored and you're like, hey, I want to read The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, you can get it for free online from Google Books. It is painful to read. So read it at your own risk. Okay, so let's talk about the Samoan Islands right now. You can see them on the map. They're right there just below the equator, right in the middle of the map. Samoa signed a treaty for protection to become a U.S. territory. and the U.S. almost went to Germany to obtain these lands and protect them from the Germans. Commodore Matthew Perry, there, not the actor from Friends. Could I be any more in the Pacific? He opened relations with Japan, and this gets rid of Japan's isolationism. They didn't really want to end their isolationism, but we went there with large guns trained on the city, and they were kind of forced to pay attention to us. But again, what are they going to do? They're never going to do anything. They're thousands of miles away. We're safe. What was that? I don't even know. How are you? So, in 1875, the U.S. decided that they were going to exempt Hawaiian sugar from tariffs. Okay? So we will buy as much sugar as we can from Hawaii. We'll pay them as much as they really want. All we want is a naval base at Pearl Harbor. But, we're not really happy with just having a naval base there whenever we could have all of it. So, in 1895, a group of planters, or farmers, decided that they were going to rebel with help from the U.S. Marines. And they overthrew, I don't even know what's wrong with me and my inability to talk. They overthrew Queen Liliuokalani. Okay? So the planters asked for the U.S. to annex them, and they were annexed into the United States by a joint resolution of Congress. So that's how we got Hawaii. We tricked a lot of planters to overthrow their queen, and then we took it without feeling guilt because they kind of asked for it. So we kind of gave them what they kind of asked for. So the Pan American Conference. So we wanted to be the dominant power in the Americas. So we proposed a union between the U.S. and Latin American countries. Okay, and this does make it possible for us to make agreements in the future. Now, the Hay-Pauncefote Treaty. This is done by John Hay, who will be a later Secretary of State, who opens up trade with China by forcing everyone to. Well, anyway, we'll get to that soon enough. Okay. So where was I? Something puppies. Yes. So the Hay-Pauncefote Treaty let the U.S. build and fortify a canal through the Americas. There were 3 places that we were looking at. One of them was in Panama, where the canal is currently built. The better location was in Nicaragua, to build it through Lake Nicaragua, where there's much less of a mosquito problem. But on the other hand, if we build it through Panama, then we can have somewhere around 25,000 people die as a result of building the canal. So, I don't know. To me, it sounds a lot better to go with a more dangerous place. Which they did. Wow, they did listen to me after all. Let's build it through the dangerous place, and let's make sure a lot of people die. Oh, and let's create a new country, too, that doesn't necessarily need to exist. Just wait, we'll get to that. So, the Venezuela event. So, this is a dispute between Germany and Britain over the Venezuela border. The U.S. steps in and says, hey, you need to listen to us. We're in charge of North and South America. And everyone kind of laughs, but eventually the British are like, okay, sure, you're in charge. And we're like, hey, this works out well for you, Britain, because guess what? You win. And we're like, yay. And they're like, yay. And all it took for them to improve our relationship was pretending like we were in charge. Now, during this time, you have what's called the Great Rapprochement. And Britain and the U.S. improved their relationship for the first time in U.S. history. So, our improved relations starts right in the 1890s and will, lead to us supporting Great Britain during World War I. So, things might have gone differently had we not done that. So, imperialism. This is the economic and political domination of a strong nation over weaker nations. Okay? Basically, it's a way of taking over other countries without having to take them over. You just basically go in there and force them to do whatever you want, or you won't trade with them. So you starve their people out instead of having to actually conquer the people. So I guess it's more civilized. So instead of, fighting people to death, you just starve them to death. Yeah, that is more civilized. What a nicer way to murder people. A protectorate, this is where local rulers are in charge, but there's a imperial power that will protect and advise them. So we have a lot of protectorates around the world. Uh, right now we have, to a certain extent, Afghanistan would be one of our protectorates, as would South Korea. South Korea's been our protectorate since '53, so 67 years they've been our protectorate. Anyway, imperialist countries will use this kind of model and take over large sections of Africa and Asia by Britain and France, and a lot of other countries will do this as well. By the way, the image of ourself down here on the bottom left hand side. On the right is kind of how we see ourselves, and on the left is how the rest of the world sees us. They see us kind of as monsters instead of as these liberators that we see ourselves as. So, Spanish rule of Cuba. Now, Cuba has been something that the United States has been interested in for quite some time. Uh, right before the Civil War, it was seen as a place for the United States to extend slavery. Okay? And now it's a place where we see ourselves as the liberator of the people that are being enslaved. Okay? So, now that we've defeated slavery, let's end it everywhere else. Okay? So what happens is Spain controls Cuba and all of its sugar plantations. Okay, they did that for purposes of making money. Okay, so the Cubans will protest, and they'll destroy Spanish crops, and they'll try and overthrow things, and their revolution fails. Okay, and tens of thousands of Cuban revolutionaries were killed by the Spanish in reconcentration camps. So they're put into camps, they're starved, and basically told, you're going to have to start towing the line and doing what a good Spanish person's supposed to do. And anyway, so the also about the same time, the Spanish ambassador, uh, a letter that he writes is published, and in that letter he's talking about how weak and stupid that McKinley is, and that Spain doesn't have to worry about McKinley because he's just like the other stupid Americans, and they're not a threat to Spain and the imperial power of Spain. Uh, I mean, that's why you don't want your mail read. If you look at the image up on the top left hand side, though, you'll see Spanish misrule. And underneath that, you'll see anarchy, and you'll see a woman inside the frying pan there. And that woman is Lady Liberty. Now, so far when we've talked about Lady Liberty, it has been in reference to the Americas, but in truth, it is Lady Liberty can be of any culture. Okay, we just always show her as an American. Okay, so that is Lady Liberty right there. Okay, just in this case, she's Cuban and she's being killed. And this kind of forces the U.S. into action because now we're kind of shamed that we have not done anything all this time about the Cubans. Now these two guys have a lot to do with the war, even though they don't fight. This is Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst. And these two men will write really exaggerated stories just to sell newspapers. Okay, and they start really writing stories about what's going on in Cuba, and they're really one of the major triggers behind the Spanish American War. Okay, But again, they're doing anything they can to sell newspapers, and if people have to die, that's fine because that means that more newspapers will sell. War sells. By the way, one of the great ironies about someone who makes up stories would probably fall under Joseph Pulitzer, who has an award named after him today, given to outstanding journalism. So, outstanding journalism named for a man who made up stories to sell newspapers. Irony. So, the Spanish American War. McKinley sends the USS Maine to Cuba to evacuate and protect Americans. Okay? So far you can follow all that. Okay? We send one of our warships to a sovereign nation to evacuate and protect people that we have that are in a place where they're not specifically welcome. Okay? So I don't know if everyone's following the irony of this. So the USS Maine, one of our naval vessels, is sent to Spain. It explodes, and 266 Americans are killed. Okay? You can see right there in the New York Journal the explosion, and you can see the Americans flying everywhere out of the ship. This is what you would call a little bit of an exaggeration. Okay? But it was enough to trigger America to go to war. Okay? So much in the same vein as in whenever Polk orders Taylor across the Nueces River, we have once again the same type of issue with the USS Maine, which goes to a foreign nation and puts our ship right outside the capital of that sovereign nation and kind of threatens them, and then it blows up. Now, the truth is, we blame the Spanish and Spanish minds for doing this, which the Spanish, I guess, could, they've got the right to mine and protect their own properties and interest. But we use this as a trigger for war, and it is found out about 10 years later that the ship blew up because of an accident in the engine room. But by that point, the war had been over for almost 10 years. This is really what is a really quick bully war. So the U.S. immediately puts a blockade around Cuba and other Spanish islands. And war begins, the war takes place over 4 months and a day. Okay? So 4 months and a day. Now, to make some of the members of Congress happy, they passed what's called the Teller Amendment that said in the U.S. Declaration of War that Cuba would get its independence if the U.S. went to war to get Cuban independence, that we would not make Cuba part of the United States. Had we made it part of the United States, that actually probably would have helped prevent a lot of problems that both places have had over the last 100 years. So the people might not have been happy about it, but it would have cut out a lot of problems and almost avoided nuclear war, even closer had that not been in place. The Philippines. Now, this was something that was this was one of the more miraculous victories in U.S. history, and so we had a new Pacific Fleet, and George Dewey took this new fleet to the Philippines on orders from Theodore Roosevelt, and the U.S. conquered it. There were 400 deaths in taking the Philippines, all by enemy combatants, not by Americans. The Americans did not have the casualty in the slightest bit. In fact, the only problem that happened in sick day at all during this invasion were there were 3 sailors who lost their voice from cheering, so they got some cough drops. Other than that, they took the islands pretty easily and prevented the Germans from taking it, and that's how the U.S. took the Philippines. We thought, okay, this is a way of expanding, and we spend the next 60 years trying to get rid of the Philippines. So, Hello, irony. So Theodore Roosevelt, he wanted to get the fame. He wanted to fight. He wanted to become a hero. So what he does is he goes to San Antonio, and right around the corner from the Alamo is a hotel. They met there. They put together a volunteer unit that went with the 9th and 10th All Black Cavalry under John Pershing. Okay, and they will get together and they will go and invade uh, Puerto Rico, and they'll help win the Battle of San Juan Hill. Cuba, okay, so the U.S. Navy was under General Miles, and he destroys the Spanish fleet. It's not even close, and the U.S. is able to free Cuba at that point. So in the war, there were for casualties in this 4 month war, uh, there were 379 people that died to actual fighting. Now, 5,462 will die from disease, but most of them will die just from. I mean, most of them die from disease, and that is yellow fever, dysentery. Uh, so basically, diarrhea kills about 10 times as many people as fighting. Okay. The Spanish didn't realize just how bad a shape things were, and Roosevelt said that they would have won had the war lasted much longer. Okay, 60,000 Spanish people died in the war. So again, this is one of those time periods where it's not until World War II that more people are dying due to combat than to disease. So the Treaty of Paris of 1898, uh, the U.S. freed Cuba. Okay, it acquired Puerto Rico and Guam uh, from Spain, and paid $20 million for the Philippines. Now there were a lot of Americans who did not believe in what we were doing there. This is called the Anti-Imperialist League, and this is led by people like Mark Twain, Samuel Gompers, Charles, or I'm sorry, Andrew Carnegie. I want to say Charles Warner was also in that group. Okay, and they were against acquiring all these new lands, as were others. So let's look at the Philippines. Okay, we have Filipino Emilio Aguinaldo, and he helped stage guerrilla warfare against the U.S. Okay, because they don't want anyone in. They don't want the Spanish in. They don't want the Germans in. They don't want Americans in. So they fight. They use guerrilla warfare to fight against the Americans. Uh, General MacArthur is in charge of U.S. forces there. He starts reconcentration camps, and he kills thousands and thousands of Filipinos that are rebelling against the Americans. Uh, this is all part of the white man's burden, and this is civilizing other lands and countries through democracy and through Christianity. So basically, we're in there. We're making everyone better. We're giving them a chance of going to heaven and learning the superior ways of the white man, which everyone wanted, and they just didn't understand. By the way, if you don't understand, this is me being sarcastic and a little bit facetious. It's what Americans thought that the rest of the world wants is to be like Americans because we are the greatest people on earth. So, anyway, I'm going to keep on going and pretend like I didn't just say what I said. So, William Howard Taft, uh, things are falling apart really bad in the Philippines, and they need someone to fix them. So, who do they pick? They pick one of the fattest men in America. That's William Howard Taft. So he tries to fix things in education, in transportation, and healthcare. And in making those rapid improvements, he lessens hostilities between the Filipinos and the Americans. And probably ate all their food because he was fat. The Foraker Act. Okay, the Foraker Act was passed during World War One as a way of providing more people that could be drafted into U.S. Armed services, but not giving them any say so in the government. So congratulations, the Foraker Act for making Puerto Rican people citizens and their land a territory. So it was all done just for World War One. So I hope everyone enjoys World War One just a little bit more, knowing that we've taken advantage of Puerto Ricans to make it possible. Okay, now the Platt Amendment. This is one of the things that becomes very controversial. This says a few things about Cuba. Number one, Cuba can't make any treaties. Okay, it sounds like they have independence, right? They can't make any treaties. Two, the U.S. gets a naval station in Cuba. That's Guantanamo Bay, which we still have today. Three, you have low Cuban debts. Okay, and four, the U.S. would protect Cuban independence. Okay, this kind of makes us responsible and intertwined with everything Cuba does from then forward. So, congratulations, happy day, everyone. This leads us to the end of today. I hope everyone enjoyed the Spanish American War and the addition of Puerto Rico and Guam and the Philippines to the United States. Uh, by the way, the Platt Amendment does effectively make Cuba into a protectorate, which is one of the key words of today. So, everyone have a great day, and I will see you all soon.